Welcome back to another episode of No Shame with Shane, where the takes have no lies, no bias, but most importantly, no shame. I'm your host, Shane Fordham. Now, I'm looking at this Eagles roster right now, and there are a few position battles that stick out to me that are the most interesting. So I'm going to go through those positions and give who I think should be the starters going into week one each of those position battles. Number one, I got to start with the receiver room. The receiver room, like I said before, this is probably the deepest receiver room in the NFL right now. This receiver group has everything you need out of your receiver room. You have your two elite talents in AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. You have your speed when it comes to Jahan Dotson. You have your size when it comes to Johnny Wilson. You have your you have your rotational talent like John Mechie. You got younger guys who can also do a few different things who are showing promise right now. Darius Cooper has a bright future ahead of him. Ainias Smith, also another guy showing promise in preseason. So it's a lot of Terrace Marshall. Like it's a lot of parts in this receiver room. Everything from seasoned elite talent to uh future rising possible talent on the rise, underrated talent. Like it's a lot of skill and capabilities in this receiver room, but you can only have three starters. You can only have three. We know who the two starters are already, obviously AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, but we need a third. Receiver three is very important. That slot receiver is very important. Slot receiver can definitely take sort of the attention away from those two elite guys, stretching the field out a little more for Jalen Hurts. I honestly think, and it looks like when it comes down to it, especially with Johnny Wilson's recent injury in this offseason right now, it seems like that receiver three spot is between Jahan Dotson and John Mechie. And if it were up to me, I honestly think Jahan Dotson should be receiver three for the Eagles. It is honestly not close. I would take Jahan Dotson at that receiver three spot over John Mechie any day of the week because one, I think Jahan Dotson is capable of more and can do more right now than John Mechie. Like I think Jahan Dotson, he's not only a guy that can be a deep threat, has shown flashes of being a deep threat type of guy. I think he's also a better ball carrier than John Mechie. I think he's just an overall more versatile wide receiver than John Mechie. He can be a deep threat. He can be a short yardage guy, but he's also dangerous just with the ball in his hands. Like I think if you were to give the ball to Jahan Dotson behind the line of scrimmage, on either a sweep or jet sweep type of play, maybe even the occasional wildcat formation, isn't too common in the NFL, but we've definitely seen it before. I think Jahan Dotson is more likely to make something shake, make something happen, with the ball in his hands, those yards after catch type of plays, as opposed to John Mechie. Like I think we've seen Jahan Dotson have that similar role, make those type of plays when he was in Washington, having more opportunity, obviously having more opportunities just overall at the ball, but obviously having a few of those opportunities where he was a catch and go type of guy, like a screen pass type of guy, a guy that might get the ball behind the line of scrimmage type of guy. That's the type of player the Eagles have in Jahan Dotson. I think having Jahan Dotson, the versatile talent of Jahan Dotson, I definitely think that having Jahan Dotson, that versatile talent, the versatile talent of Jahan Dotson at receiver three, would just simply allow this offense to do more things. And that's why I think he's a better receiver three option than John Mechie, because like I think John Mechie is not a bad number three receiver to have at all. I think that honestly could be one of the better receiver threes to have in the NFL this year. But I think he's more of a possession catch guy. Like I think he can be a deep threat. I definitely think he's more of a possession catch type of guy, a third down type of guy, as opposed to a guy like Jahan Dotson, who really has a high ceiling in terms of just being a playmaker in the NFL. He definitely has a higher ceiling than John Mechie, in my opinion. Like Jahan Dotson, in an offense where he was the number two to true number three option, as opposed to in a Philadelphia offense where he's really the fourth to fifth option, maybe even sixth. In an offense where he was one of the go-to targets, we saw Jahan Dotson show that he was capable of doing different things. He was a guy that was able to hurt a defense in the deep thirds of the field. He was a guy that was able to be used in those screen pass situations. He was a guy that was able to be used in the short yardage game, that was able to make plays, was able to get yards after the catch, was able to be a yak type of guy. Like I don't see John Mechie having that in his bag. Like I don't see John Mechie bringing that level of versatility to this offense that Jahan Dotson would be able to bring as a starter. Like honestly, like I'm looking at Jahan Dotson, bro. Like Jahan Dotson is honestly an underrated talent in the NFL. He's honestly an underrated talent. Like the Eagles have an underrated talent when it comes to Jahan Dotson in that receiver room. Jahan Dotson, if Jahan Dotson is a guy who on the Commanders could put up 500 yards, with the quarterbacks that they had, if he could put up 500 receiving yards with a quarterback like Sam Howell, Taylor Heineke, Carson Wentz, like if he could put up 500 yards with those type of quarterbacks, 500 yards with Sam Howell is easily 1,000 yards with Jalen Hurts. Like 500 yards with Taylor Heineke is easily over 1,000 yards to 1,100 yards with a guy like Jalen Hurts, an elite quarterback like Jalen Hurts. Like I think I honestly think the sky is the limit for this offense with Jahan Dotson involved in the scheme. And this is the year to sort of start scratching or reaching that surface now that we have a passing minded offensive coordinator in Kevin Patullo. Now that we're really going to see this offense sort of take steps forward and sort of reach forward a little bit in the passing game, sort of work to expand the passing game and build upon the passing game. You want a guy like Jahan Dotson involved in that offense, involved in that scheme. Like we didn't get to see, like just because we didn't get to see everything Jahan Dotson is capable of doing this past season since he's been an Eagle, doesn't mean that he can't do those things. Doesn't mean that he can't be a playmaker. Like Jahan Dotson is honestly in an unfavorable position right now for himself, just because he's in an offense where the offense wasn't made to exploit his talents. Like the offense he came into in Philly was not designed, was not made for him to succeed. Like he was playing behind two elite wide receivers in AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, playing next to an elite tight end in Dallas Goedert. But then he was also on the same field as an MVP candidate running back in Saquon Barkley. So whenever it was a pass, whenever it wasn't a run play where Saquon Barkley wasn't getting the ball, Jahan Dotson was third down on the list whenever it was a passing play. And as we know, the Eagles were not passing the ball much. Like our receivers did not get as much action last year, did not really have as much opportunity last year as they did before Saquon Barkley's arrival, prior to Saquon Barkley's arrival. And when they did get that opportunity, Jahan Dotson was like the fourth to fifth man down on that list. So I feel like Jahan Dotson's capabilities and his image is being tainted because of what we haven't seen him do yet. But just because we haven't seen him do the things that he is capable of doing does not mean that he cannot do those things. Does not mean that he cannot be a valuable playmaker for the Eagles. I honestly think Jahan Dotson is way more valuable to this offense, can be way more valuable to this offense than John Mechie ever could. Because I think Jahan Dotson's skill set is, while he does have a higher ceiling as a playmaker, as an overall receiver than John Mechie, I think his skill set complements the offense the main head honchos in this offense better than what John Mechie's skill set would. I think Jahan Dotson's skill set serves as a better complement to guys like AJ Brown and Devontae Smith and really Dallas Goedert than what John Mechie's skill set would provide. Like you obviously have your bona fide number one, you know, all superstar receiver in AJ Brown, a guy who is the best receiver in the NFL, especially when it comes to single coverage, who is one of the best receivers in 50-50 ball situations, has the second highest success rate in contested catches. You also have your number two receiver who is really underrated in those 50-50 ball situations and who is a lethal deep threat in the NFL, arguably the best number two receiver in the NFL. Like the fact that you have those two bona fide deep threats, those two guys who can really go up and win against almost any DB in the NFL, against almost any coverage that a defense could offer, that a secondary could offer. I think having a guy like Jahan Dotson who could hurt a defense in the short yardage game just as much as he could as a deep threat, but in terms of being a guy in the short yardage, but can also be a guy who can get the ball in a screen pass type of situation. I think having a guy like that is sort of that can do either or, whether it's deep thirds of the field or short yardage, that can operate in either or. I think having a guy like that also makes AJ and Devontae Smith more dangerous because now defenses, I just think the field is stretched more. The field is stretched more because you have different receivers that can do different things. I don't think John Mechie does anything different, would bring anything different to this offense that would match or compare to what Jahan Dotson would be able to bring to this offense. Now, this offense is going to be lethal regardless. I think this offense is going to, obviously the offense is going to be a problem regardless of which guy is at receiver 3. But I think in order to see this offense reach its maximum potential, I think part of that is Jahan Dotson being a starter. I think part of that is Jahan Dotson being a receiver 3 going into a season where we would be able to see more of him because of what this new focus will be of the offense, which is trusting Jalen Hurts more, allowing Jalen Hurts to move the ball through the air more, where we aren't leaning on the run game as much, leaning on the run game as much of a crutch, leaning on, putting as much weight on Saquon Barkley's shoulders as what was in place last season under Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator. So I definitely think this is a way more dangerous offense with Jahan Dotson as receiver 3 as opposed to John Mechie. I think Jahan Dotson does a plethora. I think he offers a plethora of different things. He's able to do a wide variety of different things on the field as opposed to what John Mechie, I think, would be capable of doing in this offense. So I got Jahan Dotson being receiver 3 for sure. Looking at the running back now, we got to have an RB2 to back up Saquon Barkley. I thought AJ Dillon was the clear choice going into this offseason, but now I honestly think it's going to be Will Shipley. AJ Dillon hasn't really looked too impressive. He didn't look too impressive in this past preseason game. It's not, and I understand he's coming off of injuries, he's coming off of that neck injury. He's also an older guy, so I think it's got to be taken with a grain of salt as well, but it's not looking, he's not running with the same explosiveness as he was back in Green Bay when he was backing up Aaron Jones. Like I think he could still be a promising third down type of back, like a running back, a short yardage type of back who can get you a 2 to 3 yards for a first down. But in terms of looking at a serious RB2, a serious number 2 running back to back up and supplement Saquon Barkley, I think Will Shipley is the guy. Like Will Shipley, especially, like, honestly, it gives me more faith. I have more faith in Will Shipley right now because partly because of also flashes we saw from him last season. Like plays we saw from him last season, especially that big run he had towards at the end of the season last year, where he was able to show off not only his physicality but his breakaway speed. That quick burst. So I think Will Shipley would be the perfect running back to supplement Saquon Barkley with, because I think he's honestly the type of running back that could be a third down, short down yardage type of running back like AJ Dillon once was. But I think he also has definitely more of an explosiveness and speed than what AJ Dillon at least has right now at this point in his career. I think having a younger back like there in Will Shipley, allowing him to get sort of those, you know, the majority of those carries after Saquon Barkley, in comparison to AJ Dillon, allowing him to get those carries where he is also able to, learn and pick the brain of a veteran who is still at an elite playing at an elite status in Saquon Barkley. I think allowing Will Shipley to play now while he is able to play behind a guy like Saquon Barkley, I think it's not only good for the now, but I think that's also an investment for the future. For when Saquon Barkley does kind of age out, I think that is an investment for the future, because now Will Shipley has more of that experience, more of that game time experience, that sort of that game time comfort, that development. He has, like, I think that would be more of a comfortable role for him to step into, where now he can possibly be the dominant workhorse in that running back room, where he could be the primary workhorse, the primary ball carrier in that running back room, maybe 2 to 3 years down the line, possibly. So I honestly definitely think Will Shipley is the best choice for running back two in this position battle between him and AJ Dillon, especially because I think I also think Will Shipley honestly looks better in the passing game as well. Like, Will Shipley is the perfect running back two, is the perfect RB2 for this Eagles team as opposed to AJ Dillon, because he not only looks explosive in the run, he not only showed us flashes of what he could be, the type of big play running back that he could be last season, but he's also been improving significantly in the passing game as well. He's been getting coached up. He's building a chemistry with Jalen Hurts. He's been getting coached up with Jalen Hurts in terms of what a quarterback looks for out of a running back in a passing situation. Like what makes a quarterback's life easier when he has a running back who could be a threat in the pass, like Will Shipley has shown to be this offseason. Like, he's building that chemistry with Jalen Hurts. He's getting those tips, from Saquon Barkley as well, who is also obviously a big piece and can be a big piece in the pass as well. So he's getting those tips from Jalen Hurts. He's getting those tips from Saquon Barkley. He's building that chemistry with his quarterback. He's adding he's adding that extra piece to his arsenal, that sort of dual threat ability to his arsenal, where he's already established himself as a potentially explosive running back in the NFL, a running back who does have that quick burst, who does have that big play capability. But now he's also adding that pass catcher threat to his arsenal as well. He's adding that route runner out of the backfield threat and skill set to his arsenal as well. So I think Will Shipley, sort of on the track that he's on, I think there's no question he poses as a more viable option, a more dependable option at running back two, a more of a lethal weapon at running back two out of the backfield than AJ Dillon right now. So I definitely think Will Shipley is the better option for running back two. Switching over to the defense now, I honestly think these are much easier decisions, but I definitely think for safety, Sidney Brown and Andrew Mukuba, I think Andrew Mukuba takes that for sure. I talked about this on the last episode. Andrew Mukuba, with the way he played in this past preseason game, pick six, 75-yarder, house call, fumble recovery. Like he not only did his job, he not only held down his end and was on top of his responsibilities, but he also made big plays. He put himself in a position where he could make big plays on the football. Whether it was a play that allowed the offense to come back on the field or a play that put points on the board for the Birds. I think Andrew Mukuba definitely takes that starting job with ease because he's also the perfect replacement for CJ Gardner-Johnson. We lost a piece to the puzzle last year. But Andrew Mukuba, I think, is the perfect mold to fit within that hole, in the secondary, to where the Eagles can still run without breaking a stride. It makes that CJ Gardner-Johnson loss hurt less. Cornerback 2, opposite corner of Quinyon Mitchell. I think Jacorian Bennett has that just about wrapped up. Maybe not so much just because of how good Jacorian Bennett looks, but mainly because of just how bad Adoree Jackson and Kelee Ringo have looked this offseason. Like Frank Fangio was clear. Frank Fangio was straight up about Adoree Jackson. Like he said, Adoree Jackson has been passed over by his prior teams. This is where he can show the type of guy he really is. Really just challenging Adoree Jackson to sort of step up and reach his potential. Sort of reach the peak that, reach the peak that he was, be the type of player that we thought he was going to be coming into the NFL. Like, I think Adoree Jackson has been a disappointment this offseason. It's honestly a toss-up between who has been a bigger disappointment this offseason between Kelee Ringo and Adoree Jackson. Just because I think we expected a lot out of those two guys who have shown flashes. Kelee Ringo showing flashes to be a shutdown corner last year, especially having the reputation of being a Georgia Bulldog. We know how well those Georgia Bulldogs normally pan out for the Birds. Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, to name a few. Like it's Nolan Smith. Like normally those Bulldogs pan out well for us, but Kelee Ringo just hasn't matched up to that sort of reputation. And then obviously Adoree Jackson being a veteran DB that we had brought in, sort of add some experience, where we had kind of missed that, letting go of Darius Slay as well, in addition to CJ Gardner-Johnson. I think both. It's really a toss-up between who has been a bigger disappointment. Maybe Kelee Ringo, just because of him being younger, him being looked at as a guy that was seen as a potential piece for the future of this defense. Maybe that's a slightly bigger letdown than Adoree Jackson sort of not meeting expectations. But I think honestly the way they have played this offseason, the way they have looked this offseason, the way they have struggled not only against other starting receivers, but against even the bench guys, against even the second to third string guys. I think that honestly made it easier for Jacorian Bennett to come in and pretty much lock up that starting role at opposite corner of Quinyon Mitchell. I think that made it easier, especially because Jacorian Bennett is coming off of a year where he did look like one of the more dependable starter-worthy corners in the NFL. Not a guy that was a star necessarily, not a guy that looked like he had superstar capabilities, superstar, a superstar ceiling, or anything like that, but just a guy that could simply do his job. A guy that could at least hold up his end on the opposite side of a guy who has shown that superstar star capability, that defensive player of the year really caliber ceiling in Quinyon Mitchell. That elite ceiling, that elite capability in Quinyon Mitchell. So I definitely think that's a much easier decision to make in terms of looking at that corner 2 spot, just because of how bad and how disappointing Kelee Ringo and Adoree Jackson have been this offseason after the hype that kind of went behind these guys going into the offseason. So that's an easier decision. Linebacker Linebacker, I think is probably the toughest decision to make in terms of position battle, just because of how deep and how talented this linebacker group is. Because honestly, like next to Zach Bond, any of those three guys could really start and it not be an issue. Like with Zach Bond, I think Jeremiah Trotter Jr., Nakobe Dean, of course, obviously being the starter last year, and Jihad Campbell, who just looks, I mean, whose potential is really through the roof. I think any one of those three guys could be the starter and this defense still be elite. Just because, I mean, that's just how talented all three of these guys are, especially when they're healthy in Nakobe Dean's case. But if you're asking me, I honestly think Jihad Campbell would be the best choice for starter going into the season. Like, if you have a linebacker duo of Zach Bond and Jihad Campbell, it honestly makes your capabilities at linebacker limitless because of what both of these guys are able to do athletically. Like, both of these guys can be run stoppers. Both of these guys can be pass rushers, can be blitzers that can collapse the pocket. And both of these guys are great in coverage, can be key valuable pieces in coverage. Two guys that can create a problem for running backs coming out of the backfield, where that have the athleticism to guard a tight end, have the athleticism to guard a slot receiver, and have the athleticism to guard a running back out of the backfield. Their athleticism allows them to guard multiple positions on the field. And when you have that duo in the game together, it presents even more of a challenge, in my opinion, for offenses to game plan against, because they can both do the same thing. Like, both of them can cover a running back out of the backfield. Both of them can cover a tight end. Both of them can cover a slot receiver. Both of them can play QB spy and keep their eyes on mobile dual threat quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson, like Jordan Love, like Kyler Murray, like Justin Fields. You know, guys who have explosive legs, guys who have that sort of ability as runners. You know, passers who have that ability as runners. Zach Bond and Jihad Campbell both have the athleticism and the skill set to create problems game plan wise for the offense. Can create problems mismatch wise, can create mismatches for an offense. Because usually, you know, you'll have a running back that might be able to outrun a linebacker. You'll have a slot receiver who most of the time can outrun a linebacker. You know, you'll have a tight end who sometimes is a little more even of a battle there, but a tight end who sometimes can either out physical a linebacker or can outrun a linebacker. You know, but with this linebacker duo, you're not outrunning Zach Bond and Jihad Campbell. If you're just anybody, you're not out most of the time. You're not gonna out physical. You're not gonna be more physical than Zach Bond and Jihad Campbell. Like, you don't have like a ball carrier or skill player doesn't have a lot of options when trying to beat a man-to-man coverage situation, when trying to beat these two guys in man-to-man situations. It's not a lot a skill player can do if you're just anybody. Like, if you're not Christian McCaffrey, if you're not a George Kittle, if you're not maybe a Deebo Samuel in his prime in terms of being a slot guy, if you're not that type of guy, there's not a lot you can do to beat these linebackers in coverage or in the run. But even if you are those guys, I think having that linebacker duo creates more of a problem for even those elite guys. So it definitely is a tougher decision in general, just because of how talented Jeremiah Trotter Jr. has shown to be, how talented Nakobe Dean showed to be last year when he was healthy. You know, especially having more of a sample size for Nakobe Dean, obviously, being two guys that are, in my opinion, starter capable linebackers in the NFL. It's a tougher decision when deciphering this linebacker position battle, but I'm leaning towards Jihad Campbell just because of his athletic capability, but also I think he has a higher ceiling as well. I think the athleticism he has, the mindset he has, the plays he was able to make this preseason so far, I think he also has a higher ceiling than those two guys because not only is he younger, more athletic, but he also has the same skill set as Zach Bond, who, as we know, was a linebacker who was a favorite to win Defensive Player of the Year last year. Really a Defensive Player of the Year snub last year. So I'm definitely lean. That's definitely what I'm thinking in terms of these position battles. And then again, I think it goes to say that also, if it doesn't go how I'm saying, like, it's crazy how talented all of these groups are. The fact that no matter who is starting, like if John Mechie is to start over Jahan Dotson, the offense could still be elite. If AJ Dillon is to get more carries than Will Shipley this year, the offense obviously is still going to be elite. The run game is still obviously going to be elite in tandem with Saquon Barkley. The secondary, I think that is where I draw the line in terms of that definitely matters in terms of who you have at corner 2, because I mean that definitely matters. But then, looking at linebackers, that's more of a open-ended thing, like it either way. But like it's just interesting when you look at these position battles, what the impact that all of these guys could have in their respective position. But that's all for today's edition of No Shame with Shane. If you haven't already, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe, and I will have more later on with more shameless takes.